Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. The title of today's Pastor Gary Live segment is Who Knew Paul Had a Sister? I really wanted to make that title longer by following that with, or that Ichabod was a name that came from the Bible. There are many women mentioned by name in the Bible, but there are also many unnamed women of the Bible, and we are spending our time together this week looking at and learning the stories of some of those unnamed women. Our first story today is the story about the wife of Phinehas. They were not good times in Israel. The priest in charge of the nation at that time was Eli, and while he wasn't terrible, he had been a lenient father to his two sons, and so they acted as if they were entitled to do whatever they wanted. Long story short, eventually the Israelites found themselves at war with the Philistines, and in typical fashion, the Ark of the Covenant went out to lead them in battle. It was thought that with the Ark going before them, God went before them, and they could not be defeated. Oh, what trouble we get into when we presume upon God. Well, the key figures in the battle were Eli's two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, and as things turned out, the Israelites were defeated. Hophni and Phinehas were both killed, and the ark was captured by the Philistines. When the messenger arrived to tell all this to Eli, Eli toppled over in his chair and broke his neck and died himself. Then, when Phinehas's wife, who was pregnant and due at any moment, heard that her husband and father-in-law were dead and that the ark had been captured, immediately she went into a difficult labor. As she was dying, the midwife told her, "Take heart, you have borne a son." Instead, she named the boy Ichabod, a name which means, "The glory has departed from Israel." She was upset about the deaths of her father-in-law and her husband, to be sure, but her main concern was the loss of the Ark of the Covenant. Would that God was so important to us. You probably know about our next story, the widow with the two mites. Jesus and his disciples were in the temple one day, and the Gospels tell us that Jesus closely observed people coming in and placing their offerings in the collection box. Jesus must have seen many who came in rather ostentatiously and placed their gift with a flourish and a side-eye glance to see who was seeing them. Jesus knew that their generosity was self-serving. As he watched, an elderly widow entered and meekly approached the collection box and dropped in coins equivalent to 2 pennies. Jesus said to the disciples, "This woman has given more than all the rest." The point Jesus was making was that she, who had so little, still gave in honor, praise, and gratitude to God. Her giving was from her heart. Jesus knew that's the way it should be, and he calls us to do the same. There are a couple of unnamed women I want to mention who were part of things that happened to St. Paul. As you probably know, Paul traveled all around Turkey and Greece, founding churches and preaching about Jesus. When he came to Philippi, he encountered a young woman who was possessed by a demon, and Paul cast out the demon and freed her from her affliction. However, the demon had given the young lady a spirit of divination. She could divine the future. And so when the demon was gone, she could no longer do that, and her owners, who had been charging people for her services, were not happy about their loss of income. They had Paul arrested and beaten. The story continues with Paul and his friends being freed from jail and converting the jailkeeper and his family. You'll find all this story in Acts 16, and maybe this story should remind us of how God's actions multiply in blessings. What happened to this young unnamed woman was a blessing for her to be freed from her affliction, and it led to a whole family believing in Christ in the end. Perhaps in all these stories of unnamed women, I have saved for last the one that surprised me the most. Oh, I remembered the story, but I guess I had always been caught up in the action and never thought about the people involved. Who knew that Paul had a sister? Paul had come to Jerusalem after his third missionary journey, and things did not go well. As soon as he got to the city, he started speaking about Jesus, and riots broke out, and Paul was arrested and put in jail. Then some of the Jews took an oath that they would not eat or drink anything until they had killed Paul. And then they went to the chief priests, told them about their vow, and urged them to have Paul brought to them from the jail. "Say that you want to examine him more," they suggested, "and we will lie in wait and ambush them on the way and kill Paul." But then Acts 23, verse 16 tells us that the son of Paul's sister heard about the ambush and went to the jail and told Paul, who sent him to the tribune in charge, who then made arrangements to send Paul under a large cohort of soldiers away to the officials at Caesarea, where he would be safe. Did you note that the one who foiled the plot was Paul's nephew, the son of Paul's sister? We don't know her name, and she doesn't really act in this story. But maybe what this story tells us is what all these stories about unnamed women this week tell us. God acts among everyday people. God acts in the regular world among us. You may not be doing titanic things, and your name may not be remembered centuries from now. Nevertheless, God is at work in, through, and around you, shaping the world God's way. God with us makes a difference for those around us. It's a grander honor than we can imagine. Be unnamed. Be part of God's story. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.